Okay, let's start again. Our lesson for today is about lesson 10, gender issues and corresponding laws. So for those people who already watched my video discussions last week, which is lesson 10 and lesson 8 and lesson 9, yung ibang parts dito is na-discuss ko na din doon. So, kung yung mga nauna kong lesson is pakapyaw lang, dito po, we're going to dig in further more about the topics. So, class, medyo may extend ako ng konting minutes lang for an hour naman. So, ayun po. So, lesson 10, gender issues and corresponding laws. So, let us first have a validation. Ayan. So, what are the different problems you encounter in your everyday life? Kasama ba doon sa problems na yon yung gender or birth sex mo as a person? Nagiging hindrance ba? Nagkakaroon ba ng different problems regarding those type of things? Hello? Nag-almusal na ba kayo? Hindi
Ma
pa
ma'am,
nag-almusal ha?
nawawala-wala ka po eh.
Nawawala-wala ako.
Hindi po
Wait
namin
lang.
narinig lahat.
Okay. So, ulitin ko ha. So, what are the different problems you encounter in your everyday life? Nagiging hindrance ba yung gender mo or yung gender identity mo sa person? Or yung birth sex mo dun sa mga problems na yon? Class?
Sometimes po, ma'am.
Sometimes, okay. How about the others?
Minsan din po.
Okay. So, ano yung nararanasan nyo dun sa minsan na yon? Meron ba kayong gustong i-share sa klase?
Kapag
What
po
are
may
those types of problems?
kapag monthly period po, mahirap pag sa babae.
Okay. So, mga babae, no, madalas yun, no, yung monthly period. Ang daming cramps, meron times hindi mo naiintindihan kung ano ba talagang gusto ng katawan mong mangyari, no? And other stuff. So, ano pa? Bukod sa monthly period.
Yung mga responsibilities po sa bahay.
Okay, no? Part yon ng um, pagiging human natin, yung responsibilities, specifically sa bahay. Di ba hindi lang naman kasi kayo student. So, anak din kayo, at the same time, you have different responsibilities as a person. So, ano pa po? Okay, sige, mukhang wala nang gustong sige. I will give you time na mag-share sa ibang araw. Specifically, baka pwede naman sa aking activities, no? Yan. So, bakit ko natanong yon? Kasi, catcalling, okay, yes. 'Di ba? Um, Actually, hindi ang catcalling hindi lang babae ang nakakaranas. May mga lalaki din na nakakaranas ng catcalling. Kaso mas big deal ang catcalling when it comes to girls, 'di ba? Kasi parang dun yun yung mini-mirror ng objectifying yung women. Okay, bullying.
Stereotyping po, ma'am.
Like what? What kind of stereotyping na?
Kapag po, ako po kasi usually mag-isa sa bahay. So, akala nila pag ganito hindi ko kayang gawin, ganyan, magbuhat or anything.
Okay. Lahat kaya mo. Yung ganun yung nagiging nila, no? Point of view. So, bullying, marami ding nakakaranas nito in their everyday life. It's just that sometimes we need to speak up about what we feel dun sa mga tao na nambubuli sa atin. No? Meron pa ba kayong gustong idagdag?
Wala na po.
Okay po. Sige po. If ever wala na kayong gustong idagdag, let us start our discussion. So, bakit ko natanong yung mga ganong type of problems? Specifically, regarding sa mga biases or stereotypes na nararanasan natin based on our gender or birth sex. Kasi, yung different type of things na corresponding on our lesson for today is about gender-based violence. And as you all know, hindi lang naman, no? Hindi lang naman iisang tao ang nakakaranas nito. Kung hindi, karamihan din sa population ng mga tao na nasa buong mundo is nakakaranas ng ganitong type of problem. So what is gender-based violence? Gender-based violence refers to any type of harm that is perpetrated against a person or a group of people because of their factual or perceived sex, gender, sexual orientation, and or gender identity. So meaning to say, pag sinabi natin gender-based violence, hindi lang kababaihan yung nakakaranas nito, kundi na rin mga lalaki at the same time yung mga tao na part ng LGBTQ community. So, wala tong pinipiling kasarian, wala tong pinipiling ang birth sex. Kasi nga, lahat is pwedeng maranasan to. So, at some point, on the gender-based violence class, yung cases pagdating sa kalalakihan is kakaunti yung reported cases, which is smaller than the cases reported for women. But gender-based violence in men should not be neglected dahil doon sa mga ganong pagkakataon. So gender-based violence results on an imbalance of power. Kasi may mga tao na they feel superior about someone. And some gender-based violence is deeply rooted in the social and cultural structures, norms or values of the society. Kasi meron di bang mga tao na kapag sa isang society, hindi normal yung ganun type of behavior na sa kanila or type of attitude, there is a big chance na maaaring ma-ostracize yung tao na yon. And there is also a big chance na makaranas siya ng gender-based violence. So because of the culture of denial and silence na nangyayari sa mga victims ng gender-based violence is nauulit ito sa ibang tao. So also, ang gender-based violence, marami siyang forms. And i-discuss ko yon later on. And remember gender-based violence is an issue or societal issue which involves relation of power. Katulad nga ng sabi ko, kinna. So, yung mga tao na na perpetrators or suspect for gender-based violence is they use violence to uh, see or para makita ng tao, ng kanilang victim, na sila ay superior dun sa tao na yon. And um, pinapakita nila na mas mataas yung kanilang estado pagdating sa society through violence or through perpetrating harm to a person. So next, sabi ko nga kanina, it results to the imbalance of power and equal relations between men and women in the society. Like for example, di man natin may iiwasan, no, na sa isang society, merong mas pinapaboran na gender. Specifically, kung ang isang society is isang patriarchal society, kung saan mas marami yung karapatan ng kalalakihan kaysa sa kababaihan, which is, that would be limiting for the other party. And there is no single factor that can explain gender-based violence. But there are different factors or contributing factors. In the portrayal of those factors lies at the root problems. So maraming problems ng ating society, hindi lang iisa yan. Di ba nga, pag nanood kayo, marami kayong makikita or marami kayong maririnig na issues sa ating lipunan. So, hindi lang to nakatutok sa government, but also nakatutok to dun sa social issues na meron yung ating society. At isa na doon yung gender-based violence. So, later on, I will be discussing the factors that would affect gender-based violence. But, before that, I want you to be reminded of this. So, a person who has been affected by gender-based violence is never responsible for the perpetrator's action. Diba? Usong-uso this time yung victim blaming. No? Like for example, pagdating sa, wait lang ha. Okay, I'm sorry for the quick commercial. So, let's move on. So, sabi ko nga kanina, di ba, mayroong mga tao na they victim blame. So, parang, kasalanan pa ng tao bakit siya naging biktima ng violence na yun. Always remember this one. Walang tao na ginusto na sila ay masaktan ng ibang tao. Okay? There is just, meron lang kasi talagang mga tao na sobra-sobra sila kung mag-victim blame. Like for example, no, yung issue about rape. Maraming mga tao, meron ako nababasa na comments sa comment sections ng Facebook na, syempre alam niyo naman, pagdating sa Facebook, may mga issues, andyan, daming keyboard warriors and all. So ako, mahilig lang ako magbasa ng comments. So may mga nababasa ako doon na, kaya siya na-rape kasi, ganito yung suot niya eh. Revealing yung suot niya and all. But, paano mo naman ma-justify na yung mga tao na nare-rape sila ng balot na balot naman sila? Diba? And also, remember ha, wag na wag kayong magbe-blame ng mga tao na naging victim ng gender-based violence. Yan po yung tatandaan nyo for this day and the days forward. Ayan. Tsaka meron din kasi mga tao, diba? Ayun ay nandito sa picture. Why you didn't report? Hindi mo sinabi agad. Kasi, i-discuss ko mamaya kung ano yung ibang reasons. So first muna, let us discuss the causes of gender-based violence. Number 1, there are cultural factors, legal factor, economic factors, and political factors. So for the cultural factor, patriarchal and sexist views legitimize violence. May kasing mga bansa or societies na they limit yung karapatan nila or karapatan ng kanilang mamamayan sa mga lalaki lamang. And for those societies, yung violence for them is a dominance of power or superiority. So kapag nagiging violent sila, dun nila na ipapakita na sila ay malakas. Specifically, sila ay makapangyarihan. And also, in some societies, ginagamit nila yung dahas or gender-based violence para makapanakot ng kanilang mga mamamayan. And also, gender stereotypes and prejudices. Hindi ito mawawala at isa to sa mga problems na na-encounter ng ating societies. Hindi lamang dito sa Pilipinas but also sa buong mundo. So kung mapapansin nyo, di ba, the traditional na roles of men and women is that ito yung madalas kong example sa inyo from the very beginning of my classes. Na isa sa traditional roles natin, specifically sa isang family, is that ang father will always be the provider of the family. And ang babae or ang mother, siya yung homemaker, siya yung gumagawa sa kababe. Siya yung gumagawa ng mga gawaing bahay and all. But, and there are some societies na yung ganun type of setup is hindi pa nila ganun katanggap. So as, merong mga societies na kapag ganun yung nangyayari or nagkakaroon ng role switching between men and women, is parang meron silang nadadown na isang party. Like for example, ikaw, lalaki ka, tapos house husband ka in a patriarchal society. Sa tingin mo, hindi matatapakan yung pride mo as a lalaki? Siyempre, di ba, parang madadown ka at some point na bakit halos lahat ng mga tao sa paligid mo or specifically yung mga padre de pamilya is sila yung palagi na nagpa-provide ng needs ng family, sila yung nag-aano, diba? And that is because of the prejudices. And next one is the normative expectations of femininity and masculinity. Isa na dito yung pinaka-best example na expectation sa pananamit. In some countries, pagdating sa clothing ng kababaihan nila, madalas ng mga nakapalda, madalas mga nakadresses. And yun yung isa sa expectation sa kanila ng kanilang society. Na ikaw, as babae, you have to dress appropriately to the dress code ng mga babae dun sa society na yun. And also, gender-based violence on a cultural factor can be affected by gender socialization. Di ba sabi ko nga throughout our lives, we undergo gender socialization. We met with our family, we met our friends and peers and teachers at school, and in the future, you're going to be in a workplace. So, magiging one of the places for socialization nyo din yun. Ano ba ba? Yung church, no? And also our community or the community that we have. So, pwede din maging cultural factor factor ng gender-based violence yung gender socialization. Specifically, kung ikaw ay nakatira sa isang community na parang nino-normalize ang gender-based violence, hindi malabo na ma-adapt mo din yung ganong type of behaviors or attitude towards other people. So next one, family influence. So sa family influence is malaki ding factor yung family influence when it comes to gender-based violence. Specifically, if you are or if someone is a victim of domestic violence. 'Di ba mayroong mga tao na hindi agad nila nare-report yung nangyari sa kanila na gender-based violence kasi nga po kapamilya nila yung perpetrator or hindi agad-agad nila nare-realize na yun ay gender-based violence kasi nga parang normal lang yun sa kanilang family. Diba? And also class, if you are familiar with the House of the Dead, tama ba? House of Secrets pala. It is a Netflix documentary wherein sa bansang India, mayroong isang family na nag-mass suicide sila. And then, during the investigation of the police, nalaman ng police na ini-impluwensyahan nung head of the family, which is lalaki siya, yung kanyang mga kapamilya, no, na mag-suicide din sila kasi meron ding problem or psychological problem yung head of the family na yun na naniniwala siya na kapag nag-mass suicide sila as a family is babalik yung kanilang tatay. So, at that case, diba, it would be an eye-opener for all of us na meron talagang families na kapag may problema mismo yung family nila is kinikip out or kinikip in lang nila mismo sa kanilang family. Hindi na nila nilalabas within the household, no? And next one, general acceptance of the virus. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina na parang normal na lang, no? Yung pag-commit ng gender-based violence. Next one, sexuality is told to the concept of family honor. So, mapapansinin, if you're familiar with the history of Asian culture, most of the families in an Asian culture household is dominated. Mostly is reliant with each other. So, from the very beginning of the socialization up to the very end or up to the death, ayan, nandyan lagi yung family natin, di ba? But at some point, if the country or if the society is very traditional, lalo na if they always protect the family honor, ayan. So if there is someone which is beyond on the heteronormativity, meaning to say being a man and a woman or the notion of being a man or a woman is limited lang dun sa dalawang yon. Kapag nalaman nila na yung isang part ng family nila ay part ng LGBTQ community, nagkakaroon doon na nagkakaroon ng iba't ibang type of violence. So if you're familiar with some documentaries or yung mga parts sa MMK na yung mga family members or yung head of the family, kapag nalaman nila na yung anak nila is part ng LGBT community, is hindi nila ganun matanggap. At the same time, minsan mas worse pa, 'di ba? Nakakatanggap sila ng bugbog, nakakatanggap sila ng pagpapalayas, no, within the household. Ayan. Kasi, at some point, pinoprotektahan nung ibang families yung kanilang tinatawag na family honor. Kasi meron societies talaga class na hindi pa ganun ka-open ang LGBTQ community. So, kung ikaw, lumabag ka dun sa normal na norms within that society, there's a big chance na you'll become a victim of gender-based violence. Lalo na kung naiisip, no, nung isa sa family mo na yung pagiging violent lang nila yung isang way para maging maayos ka or straight ka as a person. So next one, ito yung sinasabi ko, norms around sexuality help to account for the high number of homeless LGBTQ plus young people. So meron kasing mga societies or meron kasing mga part of the families na kapag nalaman nila na yung isang member na yon is part ng LGBTQ, so na-ostracize yung family member na yon or minsan pinapalayas pa sila ng kanilang pamilya. So next one, there are legal factors naman. When it comes to gender-based violence, being a victim of gender-based violence is number one, there is a low levels of reporting and investigation of gender-based violence. Specifically, itong reference na to is nakita ko sa Europe. What more pa kaya dito sa Philippines, di ba? Though Philippines is deeply campaigning for a gender-free or gender-fair society, hindi pa rin natin may iwasan na merong mga tao na close pa rin sila into changes, no, with our culture. So differentiation of public and private spaces in some countries which made women particularly vulnerable to violence. Kasi there are some laws specifically sa ibang bansa na limiting yung kanilang sakop. Like for example, kung ang kanilang law is applicable lang for public spaces, which means kung ikaw po ay nakaranas ng gender-based violence pagdating sa public sphere or nangyari yung gender-based violence sa public area, is protected ka ng batas na yon. But if a gender-based violence happens at home, is at yung society na yon is hindi pa nakakapag-approve or nakakagawa ng batas na applicable for gender-based violence at home, is hindi ka protected, no, as part of the community. And next one, adaptation of equal marriage in some countries. So there are some countries na okay sa kanila yung same-sex marriage. So pwede kayo mag-register ng partners ninyo and etc. But on that point or on that societies, hindi pa rin natin may iwasan yung mga tao na close pa rin yung kanilang mind when it comes to that kind of dealings or type of setup. No? That's why in some countries, being in a relationship with the same sex is definitely nagiging victim din sila ng stereotypes and other types of gender-based violence. So next one, we have economic factors. Pwedeng yung lack of economic resources, lack of support from the husband or yung partner mo, poverty, and unemployment could be a factor for a gender-based violence. Next is the political factors. So at some point, if a society is a patriarchal, hindi at close-minded yung kanilang culture or very traditional yung kanilang culture, there would be a chance or a big chance of misrepresentation or underrepresentation of women and LGBTQ plus people in the power and politics. At dahil doon, if there is an underrepresentation, mas kokonti yung opportunities na pwedeng maibahagi nung mga tao na yon. At the same time, syempre magkakaiba tayo ng point of views. No, there is a lower chances that yung policies na ipapatupad, yung laws, regulation, and etc. would be bias lang po to men. Kasi nga, may underrepresentation of women and LGBTQ plus people. So next, what are the different types of gender-based violence? Class, if you've already read or even watched my video discussions last week, ito po ay nandun na lang din. But I will dig in further more in this discussion on that part. So, we have physical, sexual, verbal, psychological, and socioeconomic violence for the type of gender-based violence. So, when we say physical violence, it is an act attempting to cause or resulting in pain or physical injuries. So, it causes to limit other self-determination. So, sabi ko nga sa inyo, the reason why some people commits gender-based violence is because para maipakita nila na sila ay superior for the other people, no, to the other party. And also, isa sa nagiging result ng gender-based violence, specifically kung ito ay physical, is the self-determination ng ibang tao. Like for example, kung ikaw ay victim, there's a big chance na bababa yung bababa yung self-esteem mo dahil dun sa nangyari sa'yo. Or minsan pa nga sa mga physical violence victim is sila ay nakikick out sa society or parang lagi na lang silang mag-isa. Yan. So, GBV or gender-based violence in public is often related to the assumptions and expectations concerning gender roles. Specifically, kapag hindi nasusunod yung roles ng babae at lalaki within the household or within a society. So, demonstrates differences in social power. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. Promote particular demands through coercion. So, ang kanilang nakikita na paraan para makuha yung kanilang gusto is through perpetrating physical violence. Specifically, mayroong mga tao na victims ng physical violence na nababalian ng buto, kailangang operahan in specific parts of their body para lang ma-restore yung healthy posisyon nun. Or minsan nagiiwan ito ng pasa, ng sugat, and etc. So class, remember this, na kapag ang perpetrator is partner ninyo, kahit pa babae yan, it would be known as domestic violence. Okay? Lalo na kung may intimate relationship kayo with the perpetrator. So, witnessing abuse of one parent by another, lalo na kung kayo ay isang anak, and nakikita nyo palaging nag-aaway yung mga magulang nyo. Tapos, hindi lang sila nagsisigawan, but also, one parent is doing physical violence. So, that would be also a problem, no, for the other party. So, yung tipong nanunood ka lang ng pagiging violent ng isang tao, that could also be a physical violence to you as a watcher of that kind of scenario. And also, Ito yung examples ng physical violence. So, beating, kicking, punching, biting, miming, or kicking. Use of objects or weapons to a person or to harm a person. Human trafficking, and slavery. So, next, verbal violence naman and hate speech. So, verbal violence can be perpetrated hindi lamang po sa physical space or sa face-to-face na space but also in the internet. So, it can also be classified as hate speech. Bakit? Kasi yung mga tao na nagko-commit ng verbal violence is yung kanilang choices of words is talaga namang nakakasakit ng damdamin ng ibang tao. It aims to humiliate the person, no? And also, this type of violence can take into words, videos, memes, pictures, specifically on different social media platforms. Yung tipong pagpapakalat ng picture mo na talaga namang ano, out of this world, yung tipong hindi normal yung ganong picture, yung tipong katawa-tawa sa ibang tao, no? Tapos pinapakalat nila, ginagawa nilang meme without your permission, so that could also categorize as an example of verbal violence. And it may also carry a violent message threatening a person or a group of people because of certain characteristics. And also, verbal violence can also be present in the physical violence. Paano? 'Di ba mayroong mga perpetrators na tinitreaten nila yung kanilang mga victims para hindi magsalita. So, that could also be categorized as verbal violence na tipong sinasaktan ka na nga physically or also giving you a verbal violence. So, meron namang mga tao na nagpapadala ng death threat, so that could also be an example or categorized as verbal violence. So, verbal violence is when these attacks become regular and systematic and purposely target someone's sensitive spots. Like for example, if ever na sensitive sa kanya yung topic, no? Like for example, yung paniniwala nila, yung race, or sometimes yung sensitive spots. Diba? And also, the object of the attacks is right to consider themselves victims of the verbal violence. So, violence can include issues that are specific to a person. So, like for example, put down others. Yan, para i-down yung others. Ridicule sila in the public or ipahiya. Use of swear words that's especially uncomfortable for other people. Siyempre, may mga tao na sobrang sensitive na kahit mamura mo lang ng simpleng mura para sa lahat is masakit na yun sa kanila. So that could also be an example of verbal violence. So saying bad things about others' loved ones, yung minsan is dinadamay na no yung iba't ibang or kung sino-sinong parte ng pamilya para lang merong argument. Threatening with other forms of violence against the victim or against somebody dear to them. Yan. At other times, the verbal abuse may be relevant to the background of the victim. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, religion, culture, language, or sexual orientation or tradition. So next, abuser often consciously targets sensitive issues in a way that is painful, humiliating, threatening to the victim. For example, number one, catcalling. So comments and jokes about women or may present women as a sex object. So that could also be a form of verbal violence. So victims are deliberately chosen because of a certain characteristics that they perceive to possess. So, minsan may mga tao na they attack people based on their physical appearance, they attack people based on their beliefs, based on their race, or based doon sa perceived nila na culture or attitude, behavior na meron yung tao na yun. So, next one, we have here sexual violence. Sabi ko nga dun sa discussion ko or video discussion ko about gender and violence, sexual violence is happening or happens because of other party is not giving their permission. So, kaya nakakapag-commit ng sexual violence. Kasi, in order for a person to have a, syempre magkaroon ng meeting or sex with the other party, kailangan laging merong consent. So, ayun po. So, the use of sexual acts wherein the abuser coerces or forces a woman or man to engage in sex or any sexual activity the victim finds unacceptable. So, dito napapasok yung sinasabi kong consent. So, marital rape and attempted rape is an example of sexual violence. So, kahit pa asawa ninyo yan or partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, kapag ka hindi kayo nagbigay ng consent, that could be considered as rape. So, next, certain forms of sexual violence are related to a victim's personal limits. Sexual violence, hindi siya limited to women and people who were part of the LGBTQ community ha. Ang sexual violence can also occur to men dahil mayroong mga lalaki na nare-rape. And also, meron ding mga tao na nagpa-perform ng sexual acts na labag sa kanilang kalooban. Like for example, yung mga sexual virtual cyber sex din na nire-raid ng mga police no na nakikita ninyo sa TV. So, that could be an example of sexual violence. Kasi mayroong mga tao na pinipilit nila, di ba? To engage in any sexual act ng isang tao. And there are some cases din na yung tawag nito, aalokin kayo ng trabaho in the province and then sa ibang location yung work na yon. Like for example is aalokin kayo ng work and then mag-work kayo sa sa Manila, ganyan, lalo na sa mga tagum part. Ang sabi doon is mag-work as a maid, no? Pero pagdating dito, wala nang work na maid, pero ang magiging work nila is magiging sex workers, no? So andun yung deception sa mga tao na victim ng sexual violence. So next one, economic violence. Yung globalization can result to feminization of poverty. So, 'di ba? Kung babalikan natin yung topic ko na gender pay gap no nung midterm, mapapansin niyo doon sa statistics na pinaresent ko sa aking discussions is mas maraming kalalakihan ang kumikita kesa sa kababaihan. So, other parts of or other types of economic violence is taking away the earnings of the victim, not allowing them to have a separate income. So, merong mga tao na hindi nila hinahayaan yung partner nila na magkaroon ng work. Or hindi man lang nagsusustento, no? Dun sa basic needs ng asawa nila or ng anak nila. Ganyan. So, contribution to a person to become financially dependent to their partner. So, yan. That could be also an example of economic violence. So, psychological abuse, it could be the result of all those abuses or all of those um violence, no? Dahil if you are a physical violence victim or a sexual, verbal, and socioeconomic victim, it could result to a psychological abuse. Kasi there are some people, they isolate themselves because of the problems dahil nahihiya sila with the judgment of the society and hindi nila nakikita na may mga tao magsusupport sa kanila, may mga tao na nagtitreat sa kanila, no? Yun ay nagkakaroon ng psychological effect sa pagkatao nila. So like for example, one of the example of psychological abuse could be an isolation of young women and men who do not act according to their traditional gender roles. Diba? So, pwede yun yung maging root cause for a psychological abuse. So, next one, trafficking against person. So, human trafficking is a global crime that trades in people and exploits them for profit. So, like for example, yung meron akong nakita recently na documentary about babies. Ayan. So, may mga babies na binebenta sa halagang 30,000 to 50,000. Ayan. Sabi ko, and that could be an example of human trafficking. Bakit? Kasi sa mga adoption or sa mga legal adoptions, wala namang perang involved doon, di ba? So it's just a building relationship between the adoptee and the parents. So it could be a long life process. Pero dun sa mga tao na nagbebenta ng mga babies is, pera-pera lang, ganon. Meron din mga tao na ginagamit nila yung ibang tao para makapagkalakal ng mga goods or yung drugs. If ever you've heard of the case kung saan yung mga drug dealers is nilulunok nila yung drugs, no? And then pupunta sila sa ibang lugar para makuha ng client yung goods or yung drugs na in-inhale nila or sorry, nilunok nila, no? At ayun, undergo sila ng operation para lang makuha ng client nila yung drugs na yon. So that could also be an example of human trafficking. Ano pa? Ayun, yung sa mga cyber sex din. That could also be an example of human trafficking. Kasi andun yung involvement, no, ng sangkatauhan. And trafficking or human trafficking is not just limited here in the Philippines. So prominent din to sa iba't ibang bansa around the world. So violence against women and their children it refers to any act or a series of acts committed by any persons against a women and their children. So it is about violence for women and the children. Like for example, yung hindi pagsusustento ng tatay sa kanyang mag-ina. So pwede yung maging category as violence against women and their children. Kasi pumapasok doon yung socio-economic abuse or socio-economic violence. No? Kasi wala doon yung sustento ng other party. So, andito pa yung iba na example. So, like for example is yung physical, sexual, psychological harm. Nagsasuffer yung other party. Ayan, assault, asunto, harassment, and other things like for example, arbitrary deprivation of liberty. So, hindi niya binibigyan ng kalayaan yung kanyang partner na babae or yung anak nila, no? So, that could be categorized as violence against women and their children. So, next, there is this thing like harassment in workplace. So, harassment becomes unlawful when enduring the offensive conduct becomes a prerequisite to continued employment, or the conduct is severe or pervasive enough that a reasonable person would consider the workplace intimidating, hostile, or abusive. Like for example is, there are some workplace na hindi nila sinasahuran yung kanilang mga kanilang mga employees. Like for example, they always tend to work their employees ng overtime pero hindi naman nila binabayaran. So that could be an example of harassment, no? And also meron pa yung mga tao na bina-blackmail nila yung employees nila. Hindi agad, meron din naman mga workplaces na hindi agad nila binibigay yung benefits na dapat makuha ng kanilang employees. Ayan. So, ayun po. So, there are 11 types of harassment in workplace. So, number 1, discriminatory, personal, physical, power, psychological, online, retaliation, sexual, quid pro quo, third party, and verbal harassment. So, discriminatory harassment, it is defined by its intention instead of how it's carried out. Like for example, is sa racial harassment, kung saan yung isa sa mga kawork mo or yung isa doon sa mga employees is hinaharas ka using your race. Like for example is nakakatanggap ka ng unequal na pagtingin, no, between the people around you, or binubuli ka because of your race. Ayan, so that could also categorize as racial harassment. So when it comes to gender harassment naman, dito na papasok yung harassment kung saan nakakatanggap ka ng iba't ibang type of threats because of your gender identity or sexual orientation. Yan. Next one naman, religious harassment. Yun din. Meron kang verbal threat because of your religious beliefs, or in-ostracize ka ng mga tao sa workplace mo because of your religion, because of your faith, or because din sa paniniwala mo, no? So next, disability-based harassment. So there are some people kasi na they work even if they have a disability. So like for example is, there are some employees na pipe sila. There are some people na bingi naman sila, or putol yung ibang part ng kanilang katawan pero they still work in a workplace, no? And hindi sila makakaligtas for harassment. Like for example, dinedeprive yung kanilang karapatan as a employee. Like for example, hindi sila binibigyan ng sweldo, hindi sila binibigyan ng sahod, o di kaya nakakatanggap sila ng bullying or any verbal threats sa company. So sa age-based harassment naman, ito sa type of harassment na hinaharas ka nila dahil sa age mo. Like for example, within the group, ikaw yung pinaka bata, and then ikaw yung lagi inuutusan ng mga superiors mo, kahit na hindi mo na trabaho, sila na ikaw pa rin yung pinapagawa. O di kaya, yung mga colleagues mo is hindi sila naniniwala na kaya mo yung isang bagay because of your age. Yan. So because of those kinds of those kind of things is categorized as discriminatory harassment. Kasi nga, merong kang makikita na bias, no, between those harassments. And next one, we have here personal harassment. So form of workplace harassment that's not based on the protected classes such as race, religion, or um, gender. So personal harassment, pwede na isang employee, isang mong kasamahan sa trabaho, personally binubuli ka. Or kunwari nakikipagkaibigan sa'yo pero ine-exploit na yung pagkatao mo, no? Sinisiraan ka patalikod, ganyan. So that could also be an example of personal harassment. So next, physical harassment naman, often called as workplace violence kasi it refers to the type of workplace harassment that involves physical attacks or threats. In extreme cases, physical harassment may be classified as assault. Kasi may mga tao na nakakaranas in their workplace na sila ay binubugbog ng kapwa nila kapwa nila employee or minsan naman sa boss talaga nila mismo. Ayun. Or nakakatanggap sila ng other type of threats. So next one naman, power harassment, common form of workplace harassment that's categorized by a power disparity between the harasser and the harassed. So ang commonly na gumagawa nito is yung mga nasa higher positions. Yung tipong binubuli nila yung mga subordinates nila. May mga boss na gano'n, no? And ang mga madalas na nagiging victim, since it is a power harassment, is that yung mga tao na nasa baba ng hierarchy. Yan. So like for example, hindi binibigay yung compensation na dapat dun sa subordinate na yun or pinapagawa ng mga bagay na hindi naman dapat siya yung magtrabaho nun. Ganun. So that could be power harassment lalo na kung sobra-sobra yung favor. So psychological harassment naman, it could result to ito yung pwedeng maging result ng mga type of harassments na na-discuss ko so far at madidiscuss ko. So, victims of psychological harassment, they feel belittled and feeling nila hindi nila kaya yung isang bagay. And nagkakaroon ito ng damage on the psychological well-being. So, like for example, ikaw ay na-physical assault or nasabihan ka na hindi maganda, lalo na kung palagi ng coworker mo or ng boss mo. So that could impact or that could be also categorized as psychological harassment. Minsan, ang nagiging effect ng psychological harassment is that may mga employees na nag-deteriorate yung kanilang physical health. Pumapayat sila or di kaya naglalagas yung buhok and ano pa ba? Lumalayo sila sa mga tao na malalapit sa kanila. And also, yung kanilang work life, parang hindi na sila ganon ka-productive gaya ng dati. No? So, yun yung mga nagiging product ng psychological harassment. Next naman is the cyberbullying. So, it is a type of bullying which happens in different digital devices. And it could occur in different types of medias or social media platforms. Like for example, may mga gumagawa ng memes about sa'yo or nagpapakalat ng mga malicious na kwento about sa'yo so that could na nag-spread out within the cyberspace so that could categorize as cyberbullying. So next one, retaliation naman. It is a subtle form of retaliation and overlooked type of workplace harassment. Pag sinabi natin retaliation harassment, it occurs when a person harasses someone else to revenge and prevent the victim from behaving in such way. So like for example, ito yung mga part kung saan merong mga rumiresback na katropahan o di kaya meron ka lang nasagi or meron ka lang na isang tao na misunderstand, pero merong lalapit sa'yo na ibang tao para siya naman yung gumante dun sa tao na ka-misunderstanding mo. So, yun. So, next one naman, sexual harassment. Simply harassment that is sexual in nature and generally includes unwanted advances, conduct of behavior. Yung ditong panghihipos kung saan part ng katawan nang walang permiso or walang consent ng victim. So, kid pro quo sexual harassment. So, it is translated to this for that. So, it is exchange-based sexual harassment. So, itong sexual harassment at kid quo, magkaiba sila. Itong sexual harassment na ito lang yung simple na sexual harassment. Like, for example, hawak lang sa kung saang part ng, hawak kung saan part ng katawan without the permission of the person. Ayan. O di kaya, yung pagyaya, no, ng sex dun sa other employees na wala naman kayong relationship. So, sa kid sexual harassment, meron ditong exchange of favors. Like, for example, itong may madalas na scenario sa mga dramas, no, na isasama kita, ipopromote kita, basta ganito yung gagawin natin. So, andun yung exchange ng sexual favor para ma-promote ka or para mas maging favorable pa sa'yo yung mangyayari dun sa isang company. Ayan. So, sabi ko, if job benefits are offered to an employee on the condition that they partake in any form of sexual conduct, so that is categorized as kid pro quo sexual harassment. Ayan. So sa third-party harassment naman, it is a type of sexual workplace harassment that perpetrated by a third party, which means someone from outside the organization. So like for example, binubuli ka, may nambubuli sa'yo pero hindi yung employees or hindi yung coworkers mo. Binubuli ka ng mga suppliers ninyo o di kaya ng other persons na outside ng company ninyo. Okay? So next one naman, verbal harassment. So it could be a result of personality conflict in the workplace that have escalated beyond the casual eye roll or something more serious. So sabi ko dito, unlike discriminatory type of harassment, verbal abuse is often not illegal. So minsan hindi na natin napapansin, no, na we are verbally harassed by someone. So for this reason, a lot of verbal harassment can be particularly damaging since it goes unnoticed or unresolved. So, hindi siya ganun kapansinin type of harassment. Pero, minsan akala lang natin, joke lang to between one or two colleagues. So, next, we're going to discuss the other gender issues, which is marginalization, multiple burden, subordination, gender stereotyping. So, sa marginalization, it is also called as social marginalization or social exclusion. Pag sinabi nating marginalization, it occurs when a person or groups of people are less able to do things or access basic services or opportunities. Like for example, is, di ba, merong mga tao na hindi nila kayang suportahan yung sarili nila para sa school. Meron namang mga tao na sinusuportahan, kaya nila suportahan yung sarili nila. May mga taong may access for a good service pagdating sa healthcare. Meron namang mga tao na namamatay na lang nang hindi nila nakikita yung doktor. So that could be an example of marginalization. Yung hindi pantay na opportunities between people or basic services between people. So what are the causes of marginalization? So ito po, wait lang. Wait lang ulit. Rinig ba yung audio?
Yes po.
Okay po, thank you. Okay. So there are different causes of marginalization at isa na doon yung poverty. Hindi lang po yung equal access with the resources ng bawat isa within the society. So there are three different types of marginalization. We have social, economic, and political marginalization. Pag sinabi nating social marginalization is ito yung type of marginalization na hindi po pantay yung karapatan or yung access ng tao sa basic necessities. Like for example, is merong mga tao, specifically pagdating sa emergency room, na nauunang ma-accommodate yung merong mga pera kaysa dun sa mga wala. Diba? So that could also be an example of social marginalization. Meron namang mga tao na nakakapag-aral sa private school wherein merong mga tao na hindi nila afford yung tuition fee in a private school. No? So when it comes to economic marginalization naman, ito yung hindi pagkakapantay. When it comes to kita, no, between the people in the society. Merong mga tao na minimum wage earner and meron namang mga tao na matataas yung kanilang sahod, yung kayang makabuhay ng mga dalawang pamilya na may tig-5 miyembro, mga ganun. So sa political marginalization naman, andito yung privilege between the society, between the different classes. So kung mapapansin ninyo, mas merong or mas malaki, mas marami yung privileges ng mga tao na merong power kaysa sa mga tao na simple lamang. So pagdating naman sa multiple burden, so it involves the 3 spheres, which is the reproductive and productive and community work role. So ito yung tipong nagsasabay-sabay na tong tatlong to, no? Like for example is yung isang babae na nagwo-work siya, and then paglabas niya ng pag-uwi niya ng bahay, siya yung magluluto pa rin, siya yung maglilinis ng bahay. At the same time, kailangan niya pa rin umattend ng meetings sa community. So andito yung part na sa nagsasabay-sabay lahat ng roles natin na reproductive, productive, and community. So minsan, pagdating sa multiple burden, nawawala yung time natin or time niya mismo para sa kanyang sarili, no? O di kaya nawawala na din yung bagay na gusto niyang gawin dahil sa ang dami na niyang schedules or dahil dun sa multiple na burden niya. So next one, gender stereotyping. So this would be just a review. So define ko na lang. attributes a set of favorable and unfavorable characteristic, roles, and traits to all members of a social group based on their sex. So, ito yung tipong prejudgment between men and women. Specifically, yung mga tao na sila po ay nagwo-work, no? Na hindi normal yung or hindi ganun na palaging nakikita ng tao. Like for example, you are a nurse, pero di ba ang tingin sa mga nurse mostly or ang pinipicture out ng society natin sa mga nurse babae, no? Parang ikaw kahit lalaki ka and then you are a nurse, no? Parang there is still a stereotype pagdating sa ganung bagay. So, subordination naman is one sex is becoming inferior to the other. So, mas mataas yung power ng isang sex to other people. Like, for example, if power has 4 categories, power over, power to, power with, and power within. No, doble lang po yung power over class. So, ayan po. Please revisit the lecture of number 9 for gender violence and corresponding laws. So, yung law po na i-discuss ko dapat is nandun sa lecture ko ng lesson number 9. So, ayan. So, I will be giving you a copy of my lecture again para sa part naman ng corresponding laws dun sa mga nabanggit ko na violence or different gender issues. Is there any questions regarding my discussion for today?
None po.
How about the others?
None po.